Chapter 1. Monsieur Perez is watching you. I've never been good at roasting duck. My mom always said.
Amelie, food is a ritual, not a chore.
Yet here I am again, and the ritual has gone predictably over salty. Today I'm standing in the kitchen, tasting the potatoes, squinting. The salt is dancing on my tongue like summer crowds on a promenade in August. Too much. Again. Monsieur Perez, the neighbor's bulldog, stocky and wise-eyed, trots past the window and stops, as he always does, checking that I'm still in charge. In his gaze, a quiet accusation. Or maybe not so quiet. It's amazing how one look from a dog can make me feel guilty. The kitchen smells of thyme and garlic. I'm listening to Flowers for Algernon. Again, the third time this month. The knife taps the board in rhythm, like a heart that hasn't yet realized it's going to crack. Celebration. Funny word. As if I'm supposed to be joyful. Today I just want to be. I just want to meet the children. Camille is coming from Toulouse. My girl. She used to sketch comics in notebook margins. Now she wears tattoos of birds and hearts. The latest one, I suspect, is for her girlfriend. I don't ask who she is. I only hope she's gentle-handed and bright-eyed. Camille deserves someone who will brush her hair when she's furious at the world. Antoine arrives from Paris. He won't talk about work, just drops calls, forgets the Wi-Fi password, disappears. The last goodbye hug he gave felt like I was his destination, not just a layover. I'd like him one day to stay for tea, without a phone glued to his palm. I cook. Carefully. Slowly. A festive dinner, not a rescue mission, but an excuse. To be together again, just for one evening. Yesterday, while washing the windows, I remembered how the kids once made snow angels on the first snowfall. Camille always wiped out and screamed her angel was drunk. Antoine did everything by the book, and then complained she messed up the symmetry. I smile. At least I still have washing windows to do, and memories that don't freeze. On the wall, the clock ticks 5. That means, in 30 minutes, the doorbell. In 40, Camille will storm in, smelling of cigarettes and patchouli. In 50 minutes, Antoine will quietly nod and set down a bottle of wine as though it were a tribute instead of a gift. A beam of evening sun slides across the countertop. I brush the tablecloth corner with my hand. Ritual. Jean-Paul is still at work. Or maybe not. We no longer check. Now his phone has more life than our talks. He smiles at the screen. I smile at the oven. Which of us is more real? Still, the unanswered question. I hear the latch on the gate creak. My heart jumps. The kids are home. Here they come. Camille laughs, shouts.
Mom, you messed up again. The duck's tomorrow.
I nod. Don't argue. I hug her. She smells like rain and freedom. Antoine stands in the doorway. Doesn't come in straight away. Just watches. Then, after a second, he smiles. Quietly. As though he's realized. This place is safe. Boots off. Socks with holes accepted. We're together. Not forever. But for tonight. And if it's for tonight, then it's for a lifetime. Chapter 2. New Kashmir. Old Habits. Jean-Paul was late. 21 minutes late. Not that I was timing it, just that the potatoes started cooling the moment the clock struck 7. And by the time he walked through the door, barely managing a smile and patting his face dry with a napkin, I knew the evening had already shifted course. He apologized. Quickly. Vaguely. We didn't ask. We haven't asked each other much of anything in a long time. As if we are both afraid of hearing a truth we already know. He had a new coat. Expensive cut. Cashmere. Probably. Not my concern.
What a fragrant home,
he said, unwinding his scarf. I told him it was time. And garlic. And maybe a hint of despair. He didn't laugh. Or didn't hear me. I didn't push it. The table was warm. Camille was talking about one of her professors who quotes Freud and throws chalk. Antoine nodded, though his eyes were tired in a way I know too well. I've learned to read exhaustion by how someone holds a fork. Jean-Paul ate in silence. His phone lay at the edge of the table like an extra plate. He didn't look at it, but each time it buzzed, something twitched in his eyes. Micro-gestures. Shoulder. Jawline. Veins. I watched like it was a play I've seen before, know the ending, still hoping for a rewrite.
Dad, did you hear me?
Camille gently tapped his shoulder.
Sorry, what did you say?
Jean-Paul jolted like he'd been scalded with lava.
I said Lies and I are planning to bike across Iceland this summer. For a month.
That sounds bold.
He said, with a weak smile.
Yeah. Mom just oversalted the potatoes, and she's still standing.
I nodded. That's our love language. Mild burns with soft landings. When the phone buzzed a third time, I felt my fingers tighten around my wine glass. Funny how a phone becomes its own person. Rhythm, heartbeat, voice. Sometimes I think he talks to it more sweetly than he ever did to me. He glanced at the screen. The corners of his mouth twitched, just slightly. But I saw it. Everything okay? I asked, quietly.
HM? Yes, of course. Just work stuff.
Of course. Christmas Eve. 7 p.m. In Lyon. Naturally. After dessert, Camille insisted on ice cream, in a house that was pushing 25 degrees Celsius, because…
Camille, Lily, it's dumb to be afraid of the cold if you're the one who brought it.
I started clearing the table. Jean-Paul offered to help. Suspicious. He never helps unless he's guilty. While he stacked the plates, the phone buzzed again, but this time, from his pocket. He flinched, took it out, read something, and smiled. A real smile. I froze, plate in hand. Quietly, so the kids wouldn't hear, I said, "Do you only smile at screens now?" He looked at me. Long. Almost with regret.
Not tonight, Amelie.
It wasn't an answer. It was a request. Or maybe a command. I'm still not sure. Chapter 3. Tart Tatin and Truth Bombs. I couldn't sleep. The kitchen clock kept ticking way too loudly. Someone coughed in the next room. Antoine. Maybe. Camille. Or maybe it was me. I thought, if this life of mine were a book, I'd flip ahead a couple of chapters just to see if it's worth sticking around. But it's not a book. You don't flip pages. You just live days. One after another. Monsieur Perez raced by the window again at 2 in the morning. No reason. Or perhaps the most important one. My reflection caught me in the glass. My shadow. It's not scary to be alone. Real fear is standing beside someone who's already walked away. Sometimes it's not the thunder that breaks a house. It's one single word. Misthrown. Misheard. Misaimed. We were eating an apple tart tatin. Camille was licking her spoon the same way she did as a kid when she declared dishwashing a plot against freedom. Antoine was busy with his phone, then killed it, and stared at his empty cup. I nearly felt relief. The evening had survived, and no one had announced who'd lost whom when. And then…
Sure, we'll be cramped for a while.
Jean-Paul said, eyeing the leftover apple slice.
But once we move…
Silence. I thought I misheard. Or that he meant the renovation. Or the us that used to exist. But then he added,
There's someone else. She's got 3 kids. The youngest is still in a crib. Imagine, Amelie, she had to rent a storage unit just for the nursery. And you and I, we've got 3 bedrooms. It's unfair.
I didn't get her at first. Then the word unfair hit me like a cold wave. Camille dropped the spoon. Stared at her father as if he were a stranger in their home. Antoine raised his head. His grey eyes, just like mine, turned suddenly dark. Us? I asked, voice calm, too calm. Who's we, Jean? He stopped. Understood. Or pretended he did. His hand reached for the wine glass and froze, as the wine might save him.
It's me.
He admitted.
I'm moving out. I thought. You said you were done being lonely.
Yes, I said. I said that. But see, I'm still here. Lonely people still cook dinner for 4. He turned away. Silence stretched over the table like the curtain in a theatre when the lead actor forgets his lines.
Who is she?
Antoine asked, voice even, but I heard the hurt. It wasn't just for me. It was for him. For that childhood he thought was safe. Jean-Paul didn't answer right away. I saw him glance at his phone beside the plate, as if looking for backup. Or forgiveness.
Sophie. A colleague. We worked on a project in Bordeaux.
Worked?
Camille smirked.
That's what you call it now?
I wanted to say, stop it. But Camille said what I only dared think.
I wasn't going to say this tonight.
He whispered.
But since
you slipped up. I leaned forward. Or since you assumed kids would swallow this like a piece of tart. He went quiet. Inside me, something crystallized. Not anger, more like ice melting in slow motion down my spine. Camille walked off. Antoine slipped outside in his pajamas. No jacket. I heard him take one deep breath, as if exhaling all the years he'd held in. Jean-Paul poured another glass of wine. His hands shook. Guilt? Maybe. But to be honest, I felt shame. For him. For us. For this story under the Christmas tree, between apples and rosemary. He said.
I didn't mean it. It just happened. Everything went wrong.
I looked at him. And for the first time in a long time, I saw a stranger. As though he stepped out of a book I'd closed ages ago. Don't worry, Jean-Paul, I said, standing up. We got used to wrong. And I walked toward the kitchen. It still smelled of cinnamon and faintly burnt caramel. The scent of our past. Chapter 4. Vinegar, Bordeaux and Amp. The truth between the lines. Later, tucked under the covers in my bedroom, I wrote a note to myself. When everything cracks, don't rush to fix it. See what's hiding inside. I didn't fall asleep until early morning. With the thought that maybe the light at the end of the tunnel is not death, but the lamp in a maternity ward. Because new life is scary when you haven't even wiped off the old. Sometimes things speak. Not right away. But you open the drawer just a little, and the whisper becomes impossible to ignore. I wasn't looking. Honestly. I was just switching the sheets in our bedroom. The pillowcases smelled of linden flowers and sleep, the kind that slips away when you stop believing in miracles, but still hope for a decent pension. When I leaned down for the bottom shelf, a plain grey envelope fell with the sheets. I picked it up, expecting a bill. Maybe a shopping list. But inside was a ticket. Paris to Bordeaux. Sunday. Return same day. In the margins, in blue pen.
Thanks for yesterday.
Rounded handwriting. Not his. Definitely not mine. I slipped the ticket back into the envelope. In his coat pocket, the receipt from Chez Leon. Foie gras, oysters, and 2 glasses of Chablis. Date: our anniversary. That night, he said he'd gotten stuck in traffic, and I had dinner alone while watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. The correct answer: nobody. Then, a hotel bill. With river view. On the exact days when Camille had a fever, I was making broth and reading crosswords aloud to distract her. He sent flowers then. From his company. The house, it turns out, was the most honest one in our family. It quietly held clues in the folds of the coat, creaks of the floorboards, and the rustle of old curtains. And only now did I learn to listen. I sat on the bed holding the evidence. But it wasn't a detective story. It was a photo album. Only instead of pictures, it was a series of tiny betrayals. Me. The kids. Us. I didn't cry. I just felt the air thicken. Like the whole world found out the truth. And it hurt. An hour later, I was standing at Madame Duval's door. She opened in a robe patterned with daisies, a glass of Bordeaux in hand. As though she'd been waiting.
Ah, Amelie.
She said, no questions asked.
Wine?
I nodded. Saying no in these situations is as pointless as trying to explain quantum physics to a tabby cat. We sat on her old couch. On her lap, the cat Zola. Very fat. Very fluffy. Very philosophical,
All men are the same.
she said after the second glass.
Some just hide it better.
Yours?
His worse.
A loser.
Or he just thought I wouldn't notice, I said.
Of course.
Because you're the kind, and kind ones are invisible, until they stop forgiving.
I laughed. Not from joy. Because nothing else was left.
What are you going to do?
She asked, picking at the cheese. For now, nothing. Just collect. Like when a child has a fever, you don't call an ambulance immediately. You smear vinegar on their forehead and brush their hair.
Gut vinegar?
Got it. And tickets. And receipts. And a heart that started beating quieter.
Well then, it's begun,
said Madame Duval, pouring more wine, maybe more than was wise. Begun what?
Your return to yourself.
I didn't answer. I just looked at Zola the cat, who yawned and curled up tighter. And for the first time in a long time, I thought, not all silence is loneliness. Sometimes, it's just a pause before a new life. Chapter 5. My Express to Nowhere. That night I dreamt I was back in the attic, the very one in Grandma's house in Bergerac. Low beams, dusty boxes, an old turntable that only worked if you pressed the cover down with a book. I was 16. I put on a record, Edith Piaf, took off my socks, and danced barefoot on the wooden floor. The boards creaked. It smelled of apple jam, dust, and old paper. I laughed, not at a joke, at the thrill. At how easy it used to be. I woke up at 4 a.m., feeling like I had lost something. Or found it. In the kitchen, the clock ticked on. I poured tea. No sugar. In silence. Outside, black trees, a stubborn street lamp, and Monsieur Perez the dog, purposefully trotting his nightly rounds. He's my constant. Like back pain. Or sadness at dawn. I remembered when I was 22, writing short stories in a notebook. About strange people at train stations. Women who hid their own keys from themselves. I thought then, anything's possible. The Sorbonne was waiting. That writing was a job. You just didn't get paid. Yet. Then Jean-Paul appeared. He wore wrinkle-free shirts. He talked about stability. About how hard being an adult is. I looked at him like I had found the answer. Turns out, it was just another question. Then we built this house. Almost like a child, with blueprints, dreams, sleepless nights, and fights over tile color. I wanted a green kitchen. Jean-Paul insisted on practical grey. In the end, the kids used markers on both samples, and we went for white, because you can hide stains more easily. Camille at 6 was already head designer. She demanded a wall for her drawings, and promptly decorated it in marker in week 1. Antoine carried boards, though he was too small to hold them properly, and we joked he was the builder with a license to fall. Every crack, every creak in the floor we absorbed like proof that this house wasn't just a place. It was our refuge, our hive, our stage and waiting room, at once. I remember that first winter. The paint still smelled fresh, the pipes howled like a choir without a conductor. The house grew with us. And maybe it was the first to feel when we stopped growing together. But it didn't judge. It just waited quietly, for me to return to myself. My stories are in a drawer of the dresser. In a green notebook. I pulled it out today for the first time in years. The paper is yellowing. The writing's the same. Uneven, but alive. I read. Then I laughed. Because in one story, the heroine lived with a man who collected miniature trains, and she called him My Express to Nowhere. I didn't know then how close to the truth that would hit. I remembered 9th grade. My first story was printed in the school paper. My teacher ticked it with a pencil. Then softly said,
Something lives inside you. Just make sure you protect it. These tire quickly.
Then it all got quiet. Not the room. Me. The silence that comes when you meet yourself in the attic of old memories. Chapter 6. Take your shoes off. The soup's getting cold. After breakfast, I pulled out the paint box. It had been buried in the storage room behind the vacuum, and the winter boots I no longer wore. Inside, 3 dried-up tubes of gouache, 2 pencils, and a handful of brushes. I can't paint. But I decided that didn't matter. On the wall between the kitchen and the living room, I drew rosemary. Just simple green lines. Camille would have scoffed.
Mom, are you for real?
Yes. I was serious. Because this was my wall. My home. My life. Even if it started in the middle. Outside, someone was setting off fireworks. I couldn't see the bursts, just their reflections in the window. And there was something symbolic in that. What shines isn't always visible directly. Sometimes the light is inside. After lunch, I drove to Bergerac. To Grandma's old house. Long sold, but I knew I was free to look inside. I stood at the gate. The house paint is peeling. The fence is leaning. But the windows still had those carved shutters. I closed my eyes and heard it, the attic floorboards creaking. The laughter of a 16-year-old girl. Piaf singing. I stayed half an hour. Tears rolled down as if reminding me, anything alive always finds a way out. Later, I drove home and wrote myself a note. You haven't forgotten yourself. You just hid. Now, you can take yourself out. That evening, I opened my laptop, created a new document, and typed, The Secret Life of Simple Things. I don't know what it will become. A story? A book? Notes for the self? But I'm writing again. Not from pain. From the desire to be. And this is no longer survival. It's the beginning. I tucked the envelope into my bag that morning, between my wallet and a pack of mint tissues. It wasn't heavy, but it felt like a tiny weight on the heart all day. I didn't rehearse what I'd say, didn't practice in front of a mirror. I just knew, the moment will find its own words. For dinner, I made simple pasta with pesto and cheese, without effort to impress. Camille made a salad with some hip green leaves I admitted I mistook for weeds. Antoine opened the wine. Jean-Paul brought a good mood, as though this evening with the kids was a play and he intended to win the role of Father of the Year. We ate. We talked. Camille talked softly about lies. Antoine listened, nodded, smiled a couple of times. I caught those moments like sunlight on water, fleeting, careful, gentle. Jean-Paul stayed calm. His phone stayed in the hallway. Maybe that was a gesture. Or maybe he simply knew that everything had already been decided. We were finishing dessert, carrot cake, too sweet but homemade, when I reached into my bag. Everything was very simple, almost ordinary. If we are doing this, I said, placing the envelope on the table, then I have an announcement too. Silence. Camille set down her fork. Antoine looked at me. Jean-Paul tensed. Just slightly, as though he remembered he forgot to turn off the stove.
What's this?
He asked, not reaching for it yet. Just looking. Open it, and you'll see. He opened it. Quietly. No sudden moves. He pulled out papers. A few sheets. Fully official. Signed. Sealed.
The house.
He whispered. Yes. I nodded. I've signed the house over to the kids. In equal shares. 2 months ago. Since you started commuting to Bordeaux. For work, of course. You know, I recently stood by Grandma's house in Bergerac. Peeling paint, a sagging fence, yet the windows still gazed at me like old eyes that had seen too much. And I thought, every child needs to know there's a place waiting for them. No matter which skirt their father dives under, no matter how many times they stumble. Camille and Antoine will always have a home where they can lay down their broken heart, or their biggest joy. He stayed silent. The papers in his hands seemed heavier. Camille looked at me, not with surprise, but with respect. Antoine looked away.
You knew.
He said finally. No. I felt it. And then I just decided I didn't want to be without a roof. Even if under it there's no us anymore. The kids were silent. Not because they were taking sides, but because they understood. In this moment, there's no choosing. We were all standing on the edge of something new. No one knew what it was. But the past had no place here anymore.
Mom,
Camille said.
when did you get like this?
Like what?
Determined. Like something turned on in you.
I smiled. Probably it had. Jean, I said, you see, every mother has a sacred right to care for her future and her children's. You can leave if you think you'll be better somewhere else. But you do not have the right to treat what has become our home like a closet to store other people's bags and strollers. These walls heard Camille's first steps, Antoine's tears after his first failures, and our rare but real laughter. This home, it's not a rental where you can change tenants. It's our stronghold. A place where the kids will always be able to bring their broken hearts or their full ones, and here only, take your shoes off, the soup's getting cold. And I will not let it become a hallway. Jean-Paul sat still holding the papers. He didn't argue, didn't get angry. He just looked. Small. Not pitiful, not that, but small. Like someone who lost without fighting.
Is this the end?
He whispered. I thought. And then I said, this is a new act. In this play, I'm no longer an extra. When the evening ended, the kids went to their rooms. Jean-Paul went to his. I stayed in the kitchen. Monsieur Perez ran outside the window. As always. Only tonight, this was different. I poured a glass of wine. And wrote a note. You can be silent when you need to. But now, you can also speak. Chapter 7. System Update. Home. Woman. Life. The morning started with coffee and paint. I poured myself a cup, set it on the windowsill, and threw the windows wide open. The cold air burst into the kitchen like an unexpected wedding guest. Loud, fresh, brutally honest. I stood in my pajamas with a brush in hand. For the first time in far too long, I felt like not a shadow, but the owner. Of the house. Of life. Of the wall. The wall was yellowish. Old. We once picked that color together. Jean-Paul said it was warm, like a Provencal village. Back then, it struck me as tired, like a Monday. But I didn't argue. I often didn't. Now, I wasn't silent. Now I chose pale green. Almost mint. Nearly fresh. I stroked the wall with the brush, not caring about even strokes. Let the drip show. Let the mark stay. This is my wall, my story, and it doesn't have to be neat. As I painted, the kettle boiled on the stove. The stove gave a little click and winked at me with its blue flame. In the kitchen corner, the radio played something old, French. A song my mother used to sing while ironing clean sheets. The first thing I threw out, the curtains. Heavy, velvet, Bordeaux, as Jean-Paul called them. They collected dust, trapped smells, blocked light. I yanked them off the rod with unexpected pleasure. Almost joy. Without them, the room changed. It became bright. Honest. Like a confession. I hung a sheer curtain instead, light, almost weightless, fluttering in the breeze as though inviting the street air in. Jean-Paul would surely say it's impractical.
Dust settles. Washing takes time.
But for the first time, I didn't care. Let it dust. Let it drift. Let it live. I placed it on the windowsill. With lemon balm, its scent always seemed to whisper, breathe deeper. I bought it that morning, at the station shop. The vendor said.
Scent banishes fatigue and longing.
I nodded. Exactly what I needed. Then I went outside. To the maple tree. It stood by the fence for 20 years. Jean-Paul planted it when Antoine was born and said,
Let it grow with us.
But the maple died. Its branches broke like letters with no address. I took a saw. I sliced not out of anger, out of recognition that it couldn't go on. In its place, I planted sage. Tart, tough, like something that heals both wounds and memory. And next to it, mint. To remind, life needn't be bitter alone. I removed photos from the walls. Not all. Only the ones of me, Jean-Paul, and like a couple. Where the smiles weren't mine. The poses weren't mine. I kept the kids' pictures, the seaside ones, a silly photo of me in a robe with crumbs on my face holding a coffee cup, while Camille laughed in the frame. On the kitchen shelf, I placed a little note. From me to me. This house, not just walls. It's you. Chapter 8. No reply coming. Antoine was the first to notice.
So, did you repaint?
He asked, stepping into the kitchen that morning. Yes, I responded.
Didn't think you ever would. You've tolerated that Provence look for 10 years.
Not bravery. Just. I got tired of lying to myself. He nodded. Then he poured his coffee. No words. But I saw it. He breathed easier. That evening, Camille came home. Looked around. Smiled.
Well, this is definitely you now.
Why?
Because it's light now. Warm. A little bold. And smells like herbs.
Later, I lit candles. Just because. Put on old-school Aznavour. Slunk into the armchair with a book. Monsieur Perez sat by the window like a guard of my new space. Jean-Paul didn't call. Didn't write. And honestly, I wasn't waiting. Not because there was no hurt. But because there was no need. I was home again. Not in the house that was built. But in the home I'm building. He started writing a week later. First, short.
Sorry.
Then,
I miss you.
Then, a long message listing what he wanted to explain. As though everything that happened could be tidied into neat paragraphs to make sense. I didn't reply. Not to punish him. Because his words had no addressee. He was writing about the past. I don't live there anymore. 2 weeks later, he called. His name flashed on my screen, not as husband, but as a line on an old contract. It expired. I didn't pick up. He called again an hour later. Then at night. Left a voicemail.
Amelie. It's me. I don't know how this happened. I'm an idiot. I lost everything. I thought I knew what I wanted. But I guess I got it wrong. You were, well, you always were.
I listened. Then I deleted. No anger. Just, didn't want to keep something that has no form anymore. The kids said nothing. One day, Camille asked.
Is he? Where is he now?
I shrugged. Renting an apartment. In Vusia, I think.
Alone?
I think so. She nodded. Not with joy. Not with pity. Just a fact. We both knew, being alone and being yourself are not the same. A month later, he sent a photo, a coffee cup, a book, his hand. Caption.
Everything reminds me of you.
I smiled. Because it was true. Only now, it didn't touch me. Chapter 9. Mint leaves. Tears optional. One day, he showed up. Without calling, just stood at the gate. Camille saw him through the window and called me. I walked out. No drama. No fear. He stood there like a schoolboy who forgot his homework.
I just wanted to see.
He said.
That's all.
He waved at the house. The walls. The flower beds. My new windows without curtains.
You've changed everything.
No, Jean-Paul, I said. I just took the excess away. He stood a long time. Didn't leave. Didn't ask. Just stared. I stepped closer. Quiet. You're not bad. Just, you didn't know what to do with me.
I thought you'd always be there. Then you vanished.
I didn't vanish. I came back to myself. He lowered his eyes. Then nodded. Walked away slowly. Barely looking back. That evening I wrote myself another note. Short. Sometimes forgiveness just means learning to stop waiting for a reply. We sat on the veranda. The old wooden bench creaked like my knees in the mornings. In my hand, lemon tea. In Camille's, a cigarette she hid behind her back like when she was 16.
Mum, Can I ask you something?
she said, not looking at me. Of course, I replied.
When did you stop being afraid to be yourself?
I smiled. Slowly, after a pause. For a long time, I wasn't myself. Not from fear, from habit. Then, I just got tired of pretending. Camille nodded, smoked to the filter, then stubbed out the cigarette against the basil pot.
Lies is my girlfriend. I love her. For a year now. I just didn't tell Dad. Well, you know.
I took her hand. It was warm. The hand of a grown woman who still trembles a little in front of the truth. Camille, if you're looking for a way to lose your father, don't say it. But if you're looking for a way to find yourself, say it. She looked at me. A long look. Like testing whether I really believe my own words.
And if he turns away?
Then you'll understand he's not with you. Meanwhile, Antoine was in the garden. He didn't say much but did a lot. In the past weeks, he'd built a bench from old boards, fixed the fence, and dug holes for new bushes. He came home with soil under his nails and bruises on his elbows, and a strange, almost childlike focus. I came up beside him with sea buckthorn tea. Resting?
No. I'm collecting.
What?
Myself. Board by board.
He smiled. Then he showed me a notebook. Sketches, plans, measurements. A small workshop, almost a shed, but with windows, a workbench, a shelf for tools. He called it his quiet space.
Think it's stupid?
He asked. I think it's you. And I think I've missed you. He nodded. And, like when he was small, pressed his cheek to my shoulder. For a second. Quick. But enough. Chapter 10. Old coat. New book. Third cup of tea. That evening, the three of us sat in the kitchen. We ate potatoes, properly salted this time. We drank wine. Camille talked about lies. Antoine, about his workshop. I, about how I planned to transplant the lavender. No one interrupted. No one judged. We didn't become the perfect family, but we became real. And that was even better. It just felt like the silence at the fourth plate was saying more than any of us could. My first story I wrote in 3 hours. It was short, about a woman who talks to the bread loaf in the bakery. Nothing special. But when I put the final period, I felt a soft warmth spread between my ribs, like someone gently poured a little hot tea, and it rippled inside. I haven't shown the text to anyone. Yet. But I printed it. And placed it in the drawer where bills used to sit. Something else lives there now. I began writing every day. In the morning, over coffee. At noon, on the garden bench. In the evening, when the house fell asleep. Notes. Thoughts. Questions. Sometimes full scenes. Sometimes just sentences. Don't be afraid of being out of place. If it's empty, don't fill it with noise. Sadness isn't always the enemy. Sometimes it's the bridge. I called it Notes on the Exhale. No one asked. But that didn't matter. One day I went to the library. Just to return books. On the bulletin board, reading night, bring your own. I went. Not because I wanted to be heard, but because I no longer wanted to stay silent. A small hall. People with eyes full of stories they'd read. A young guy recited poems about cheese and loneliness. A woman with chestnut hair did a monologue about a sheepdog. Everyone listened. No laughter. No condescension. I read my story about bread and a woman. No one interrupted. No one yawned. Afterwards, 3 people came up. Said thank you. I went home, opened a bottle of wine, and wrote, I am no longer a bystander. I'm a participant. A month later, I got invited to a writing circle. We just write for the fun of it, they announced. There were retirees, lawyers, students, and even one cook. Each with their truth. Every Wednesday, readings, tea, discussion, laughter. They called me Amélie. Not Jean Paul's wife. Not the mother of Camille and Antoine. Just Amélie. With my words. My commas. My pauses. Sometimes men talk to me. In the park. At the fair. In the library. One, a widower, who made wooden jewelry. Another history teacher spoke too loudly, but knew how to listen. I wasn't falling in love. Didn't plan. But I stopped fearing being interesting. Even beautiful. Even noticed. One man said,
Your eyes are like people who know more than they say.
I answered, I just learned to keep what I used to give away without being asked. He smiled. And we had coffee. No promises. But warmth. Of course, sometimes it hit me. Nostalgia. Loneliness. Memories. I didn't fight. I just opened my notebook and wrote, right now I'm sad. But not afraid. In the garden now. Lavender. Thyme. Sage. And mint. A full little apothecary. The maple's gone, but some scents keep me anchored. Antoine built his workshop. Camille sent a postcard from Iceland. On it, 2 silhouettes against a waterfall and the caption,
I chose myself. Thanks, Mom.
I looked at the signs and understood. The kids move forward. And I still keep the past like an old coat in the closet. I'm rescenting the moth bags, though I haven't worn it in years. Maybe it's time to let go. I stuck the postcard on the fridge. I smiled. And went back to writing. Chapter 11. Goodbye, Jean Paul. Hello, Pinot Grigio. I started the letter with, Jean Paul, this is not an accusation. It's an inventory of memory. I wrote by hand. Slowly. Deliberately. On embossed stationery. The kind my grandmother used when writing long letters to her sisters in Provence. I wasn't trying to say something profound. Just lay it out. Like pulling things out of a wardrobe. Sorting. Weighing. Deciding what to keep. What to donate. I wrote, you weren't bad. You just became someone else. Not all at once. Gradually. Almost imperceptibly. Like how walls fade. Not in a day, but over decades. Then one moment you look, and you don't recognize the color. I was beside you when you built your career, flared up, grew tired, and went quiet. I tried to be convenient, gentle, pliable, until I realized that in that pliable body, there were no bones left. You wanted to be free. And you were. And I wanted to be myself. And now, finally, I am. Remember how you lost your wedding ring on the beach in Honfleur and said maybe the sea swallowed it because it knew it no longer fitted you? I laughed then. And now I understand. You were more honest than you seemed. Then I paused. Stared at the page. I thought, why am I writing this? So he'll understand? Forgive. Come back. No. Just to let go. The last line was the most important. I am grateful to you. You were my long road back to me. I folded the letter. Placed it in an envelope. Marked it. Do not send. Then I took an old salad bowl, went out to the garden, and burned the letter. Gently. No hurry. The ash rose, settled on my knees. The smoke drifted upward, along with what I was no longer going to keep. When the last line turned to ash, I simply breathed. No words. For the first time in a long while, light. An hour later, I was at the wine bar on the corner. Behind the counter stood the bartender, Serge, with his perpetual grin and a ring on his pinky.
What's it going to be tonight, Madame Amélie?
He asked. Something soft, I replied, not shouting, but telling. He poured the wine. The glass felt warm in my hand. The color, late evening. The taste, like something I'd earned. I sat by the window, watched people hurry, laugh, carry bags, umbrellas, fatigue, and joy, all at once. None of them knew I had just burned my past life. And that was perfect. On a napkin, I scribbled. I don't know what comes next. But I'm not afraid anymore. I left the napkin for Serge. He said he'd collect my thoughts.
And what if there's a book in that?
Maybe there already is, I replied. He smiled. Poured me another half glass. Just because. Sometimes, to start a new chapter, you don't need a capital letter. You just need to put a period. Chapter 12. The house smelled of cleanliness and flowers. Camille said the best proof a house is alive is its scent. I agreed. Because this house was alive. The floors creaked. The curtains whispered. It glowed from within. The maple tree was gone, but 2 lanterns stood at the gate, motion sensitive, clicking on every 3 minutes, sometimes for Camille and Lies carrying gifts, sometimes for Antoine stepping outside for a smoke, or for me forgetting the bread in the car. On the table, candles, wine, plates with gold rims I once saved, for a special occasion. Tonight, like it was that occasion. Camille arrived with Lies the day before the holiday. They brought cheese, books, and handmade Christmas ornaments. Camille said,
We decided we don't need matching socks. Only freedom and mulled wine.
I nodded. That was enough. Antoine showed up the next morning, fingers frozen, holding a box. Inside, his first book. A short story collection. On the cover, a drawing of my kitchen. Drawn by him. He said,
It all started the night I fixed the cupboard door.
I didn't understand at first, but then I got it. We didn't talk about Jean-Paul. Not because there was no hurt, but because it simply wasn't needed anymore. He called on my birthday. Courteously. Quietly. I wished him warmth. He wished me light. Everything was right. Camille hugged Lies, adjusted her earrings, and laughed. Antoine placed candles on the windowsill, checked for drafts. I watched. Didn't interfere. Just inhaled it all. Like you breathe winter. Cold, yes, but deep. Monsieur Perez came in to nap by the stove. Serge from the wine bar sent a postcard with a pear and the words,
May life be juicy.
I framed the postcard. Above the fireplace. At the table, we pulled lots. Who would tell the funny childhood story? Camille lost. She remembered that winter day when I, all busy and distracted, pulled the sled so determinedly that only after 50 meters I realized it had become suspiciously light. Camille was left behind, sulking in a snowdrift. I was scared then, but I think she felt for the first time. Mums can be distracted too. We laughed until we cried. Not out of fatigue. Out of love. Even Monsieur Perez, waking up by the stove, looked at us as though he considered himself part of the family and waited his turn to tell a story about sleds. Chapter 13. Everything passed. Everything stayed. When the evening started to cool down, I stepped outside. With wine. With a scarf. With myself. The snow was light. Barely touching my shoulders, as if reminding, everything passes, and everything remains. In the windows, the house glowed. There, family. There, life. I inhaled. It smelled of winter. In the glass, the wine reflected the candlelight, thick, like the night. Now, it's real, I thought. And I smiled. Quietly, with no audience. Like a woman who finally believed, the world isn't fighting her. The world is with her. If you've made it this far, it means you, like me, had something that hurt. Or still hurts. Or maybe you just love good stories. Either way, we are on the same bench. No blanket, but with understanding. I told everything, as well as I could, so that inside us there would be a little more space. And fewer lumps in the throat. Now, it's your turn. Share your story in the comments. You can go with a happy ending. Or not. You can simply write, I too had a maple. And I cut it down too. I'll understand. By the way, if right now you feel like repainting the wall or throwing out the curtains, consider it a sign. I'm here. Reading between the lines. And hearing everything you didn't say out loud.